Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Chatham Select Board meeting of March 8th, 2023. Let the record show we started promptly at 5:32. Hopefully this is one of the last times I have to read this, but pursuant to Governor Baker's July 16th, 2022 signing of an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, including the extension of his March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, until March 31st, 2023, this meeting of the Chatham Select Board is being conducted in person and via remote participation. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may do so by calling the phone number 1-508-945-4410, conference ID 203-386-491#, or join the meeting online via Microsoft Teams with the link in the posted agenda. While this is a live broadcast and simulcast on Channel 18, despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide for real-time access. We will post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as is possible. Good evening, everyone. My first order of business is to see if we've got a quorum here on the board. Mr. Schell?
Present.
Ms. Davis?
Present.
Mr. Nicastro?
Present.
And Mr. Dykens is present as well. Mr. Metters has recused himself from this consideration, from this deliberation. Tonight we have one single item that we're going to talk about. We're going to hear from the architects and our planners this evening. We're going to talk about the new Council on Aging Center, or also known as, or I should say the Center for Active Living, also known as the Council on Aging, or formerly known as the Council on Aging. As you well know, most likely, we've been gifted, re-gifted, I should say, the parcel at 1610 Main Street by very generous William Marsh of Eastern Homes. And it would be certainly, we would be more than remiss should we not take that gift into deep and serious consideration for the site of the COA. You've heard me say this before, I'll say it again, we have looked in every single nook and cranny of this town for town-owned property and for private property to place a new COA, and have come up pretty much empty. We've met with resistance and other issues with pretty much with respect to every single parcel we've looked at. So I look at this gift, this re-gift, as manna from heaven, as another opportunity to create a Council on Aging that's worthy of the great town of Chatham and is worthy of our senior citizens for this year and for the next 40 years. So that's what we're about tonight. We know that costs have gone up, and we're going to hear from the architect and get a good shot at what we think this thing is going to cost. We'll probably pressure them to do better than that, but as we know, we've had inflation, near-term inflation, and there's been a lot of pressures in the economy on pricing, supply issues, et cetera, supply chain issues, et cetera. So here we go. I welcome everybody, and this will be a public meeting. We'll certainly allow questions and conversation by our public, either here in present or virtually online, okay? So, first up, I'm going to introduce Jill and Leah and Terry. Jill Goldsmith, our town manager, Leah, our director of community services, and Terry Whalen, our principal projects administrator, to tee this up, and then we'll hear from the experts as well. Thank you. Jill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You did a fabulous job teeing it up for us. Just some specifics. You have a packet with you that has an agenda report. So tonight, not only receiving information on the Council on Aging Center for Active Living, but considering placing an article on the warrant and voting to support that article, as well as a ballot question for a Prop 2.5 override. We have a brief presentation by the project team, Joel Barkman, who's our architect, Rick Pomeroy, our owner's project manager, and I also have Alex remotely for any questions related to financial impact and the overall debt for the town. In your packet, it notes how what has happened since February 7th, basically, when the town or the board had accepted the generous gift by Mr. Marsh. So the project team had reviewed the previous building layout for any updated building and energy codes, as well as considered revised operational aspects only for post-COVID considerations. And they have developed a revised total budget cost estimate reflective of current economic conditions and projections through bidding and construction. So breaking some good news, the costs have come down for the proposed estimates. The project team, up until about 3 o'clock today, were really digging through it to make sure that they can provide the board as much information as closely as we can get to the cost. We had 2 cost estimates, and that's something that the project team can discuss. And in your packet, we had estimated the potential range, depending on the contingencies that we feel comfortable with, anywhere from $10.8 million to $11.144 million. But since then, as of 3:15 today, the cost, this is for the total estimated project cost, is anywhere between $10,419,000 to $10,668,000. Again, it depends on what level of contingencies that we're comfortable with. We have not gone out to bid, of course, for this project, and what you have in front of you are strong concepts. So they're not the actual design plans, but they're strong enough for the project team to get estimates. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Joel Barkman and Rick Pomeroy, who are both here in person. Thank you.
Good evening, Joel. Good evening, Rick.
Good evening.
Welcome.
All right, he did. Thank you. I was trying to figure out how to get that screen to come up. I'm Joel Bargman. I am the architect, and I see familiar faces, but we thought that perhaps there might be some new folks online or in the audience, and so we wanted to give just a brief overview of the plan and what this building is, so that everybody starts at the same position. So some of this is going to be redundant to the board, but okay, so the plan of the building is a very similar plan. It's 10,965 square feet. That's the total area, includes all, that's the gross area. It's on 2 levels. The programmatic change is that on the second floor, one of these program rooms is intended to become converted to an adult care program. And we have some recommendations for how to accommodate that as best you can and not lose the programming that you'll lose by converting a program room to an adult care room. Everything else of the plan is similar to what you had in 2020 and 2021, and we did that intentionally so that we could start out by estimating this apples to apples. The site work additionally is the same site plan as we had in years past, with the building fronting on the Main Street and the parking coming up around. What's really great about this particular site is that once you're on the site, it's flat by virtue of our leveling out the back portion of it, but the front is all flat, and the parking is really proximate to the front door. That was really one of the great features. I think we had 80-some% of our parking with 125 feet of the front door, which is really great for this kind of project. I also neglected to mention that while this is the site, it does abut the town conservation land, so you get the advantage of more green space than might be perceived by just virtue of the 1610 site. And just for the record, since I knew this would be part of the go online as a record of the night, I don't need to go into this, but we were showing what the elevations and the height of the building was so folks could see what the building looked like if they want to get online and look at that in the next couple weeks. This is the main entry coming from the parking lot. There's a second main entry also with the portico coming from the other parking lot. So that accounts for why we can get this building really close to the access. It's not that all seniors need an accessible route to the building, but it's just that people tend to take the closest space to the door, and one way to mitigate the absence of accessible spaces is to get all of the spaces close to the front of the building. Okay, so that's the overview. What we did then is we went back to the 2020 estimate, and what we were trying to do is have a baseline to compare where were we and where are we today. We hired the same cost estimator, CHA, to do an estimate of the same building, the same site work, but at 2023 values as opposed to the original estimate of 2020. And then because there's so much uncertainty in the market and in costs, and we know people are going to say, well, why is it so much more expensive? We hired a second estimator to do a completely independent estimate so we could compare what one estimator thinks relative to the CHA estimate and really have a check and balance so that we're very confident tonight about the numbers. And I'll just go through two other processes before I get to these numbers. In your packet, there's some other costs that go into the project, furniture, technology, and I'll explain the technology. This time we did a very detailed room layout of each room with all the furniture. We did a schedule of all the furniture. We have a couple of senior centers where we've just furnished them so we have current prices. So the numbers in your handout tonight for furniture and equipment aren't just per square foot numbers now, they're real numbers. And the technology, I wanted to mention, you'll see on your handout that did increase a little bit, and that's the one measure from COVID that has impacted senior centers, that we have more technology for distance learning, for folks that want to connect from their home to programs in the senior center. But again, these numbers are based on going through the rooms, fitting out the rooms with technology, and putting real costs onto that as opposed to a general number per square foot. So with that, I'll let Rick walk you through the numbers.
Would you mind going to the impact chart? Just, no, that one first. Maybe we talk about that a little bit. Joel put this together. I'm sorry. My name is Richard Pomeroy from Pomeroy Associates, acting as the owner's project manager for the town. So Joel put this quickly together just so we could get a flavor. We don't have dollars associated with it as much, but looking at our 2020 costs, the escalation factors from 2020 to midpoint construction, which is 2024. And then we've just gone through an energy code upgrade. So the energy code impact has had the energy code upgrades has had a big impact on our cost, as well as the building code upgrades. So we're looking at the impacts being escalation, energy code upgrades, and building code upgrades. The figures you have in front of you start with our 2020 estimate that was in front of the town. The next column to the right is when we were back in front of the select board in 2021. There was no estimate conducted at that point. It was an opinion as to where things were. And then we have, of course, our 2023 estimate. And the 2023 estimate is escalated to midpoint construction, which would be estimated to be July, August of 2024. We've seen some sizable increases, as you see here, and it's very hard to understand from a community's perspective. Our soft costs have gone up marginally, but our big numbers are in our hard cost, in the total construction costs. We're seeing an increase in the building, the site. We've also seen an increase in escalation that we've carried, which brings us down to our total construction costs. And right now, with escalation factored in, our construction costs are coming in at $775 a square foot. This is hard to understand, hard to swallow, but it's based upon three different estimates. Then the estimates are looking at, or two different estimates, but the estimates are looking at real-time factors. The way the estimates, these are really early concept designs. So the estimators are looking at these they'll do quantitative takeoffs on the information they have. They'll compare that to industry standards for pricing. They'll also look at what they don't know about the drawings, and they'll add a factor in for that. And then they'll compare on a regular basis what the real-time bids are in the industry at this time. So each one of these estimators are constantly getting back bid analysis from us and other architectural firms and owners project managers firms as bids come in. So that gives them a basis for their estimating. And it's an estimate. Excuse me, it's a conservative estimate. And we want them to be conservative because we don't really know what the cost is going to be to midpoint construction. We can estimate what it'll be, but we really don't know. And when you have a bid in hand is when you really know what your estimates are. So I want to give you a little walk down memory lane. Some of you will appreciate this, but back in 2015, we put out to bid, or late 2014, and we started, we received the bids in early 15. It was the Chatham Fire Headquarters building. And that building was 20,714 square feet. The low bid came in at $6,600,000 and change. So the construction cost was $320 a square foot. That's hard construction costs. That's after estimates, that's bid in hand. And that's really what our true number is, bid in hand. We just received today at 2 o'clock our estimates for the Stoughton Fire Station. And Stoughton Fire Station is a little bit larger, 25,000 square feet. It's a little less dynamic in the sense it doesn't have a headquarters in it, so it's a little less expensive on a square foot cost. It's more of a sleeping quarters and a place for apparatus. And it's a scaled down design. In other words, no pitched roofs, all flat roofs. We cut as much out of this to save as much money as possible. Our bids came in at $708 a square foot today. Virtually the same building. 8 years later, more than 2 times the value. And this is, what's driving this factor is fuel cost, escalation, labor shortages, material cost, manufacturing cost, across the board. And it's not something that we can control. It's what the industry is paying for their facilities. And this estimate, we're really happy with this estimate. It was 7.9% below, or we were really happy with this bid. It was 7.9% below our estimate. So we were being conservative. We wanted to make sure the facility got built. And so we were conservative with our estimates, and now we have a very happy client because they've bolstered their contingency and they're moving forward with their project. This is the same way that we have been operating. I've been doing this for 20 years for municipalities, and we represent communities from here all the way out to Southbridge in the Cape and Islands. We've been doing this for 20 years. Joel's been doing the same thing. We try to present conservative, realistic numbers. We don't try to hammer it down to the bottom line because the last thing you need is to have a bid in hand that's over your budget, and then you're going back for more money. So the numbers that we're looking at right now are about $775 a square foot, and that's looking at a cost a year from now, a year and a half from now. So that's kind of how we got to where we are. It's based upon 2 estimates. It's based on a lot of knowledge, a lot of feedback. There's been a lot of hard work. Joel has been hammering this for a few weeks now since this came back on, came back up. But we're looking at this and saying we've put together 2 budgets. One with an owner's contingency of 5% plus an additional owner's contingency of 2.5%, and another proposal with just the 5%. Our recommendation is always going. We try to recommend 10%. In many cases, we just ratchet that down to 7.5%. In our last go around in 2020, there was a lot of pressure to drive the number down. I think we did a lot of value engineering in the site work at that time. We did a lot of cost-saving measures, and we reduced the contingency. But it's hard to accept. It's hard to swallow. But as I said in our team meeting the other day, I said I've got bids coming, and right before our meetings, hopefully I'll be presenting what I think are good information.
I'll just add to that, that one of the purposes of having these elevations is to allow the cost estimator to do a real takeoff of the building. So while it's conceptual, it's based in real vision of what the building would be. And no one will remember, but we hired Coastal Engineering to go through this site and do all the quantity takeoffs for cut and fill and verify that so that the cost estimators had accurate numbers, and we still have access to those numbers, which I gave to the estimators again for this estimate. So we have really, we think, very good data for where the project's at today.
Okay, gentlemen, I'm just going to tee it up a little bit, and then I'll turn to the rest of the select board. I just have really kind of three areas I wanted to focus on in terms of cost, just so I understand. I don't even begin to think I'm expert at all in terms of building construction, so I'm going to leave that one alone. My only comment there is perhaps inflation's coming down, perhaps supply chain issues are freeing up, who knows? But it seems to me it's a little better than it was, but the building construction costs are up like 1.1. But what I did want to ask about in specific were the dollar and the cost increases in the site plans. It went up $385K, about 21%. We had, the site's being given to us, number one. Number two, it's flat. Number three, I believe that utilities are pretty close by, if not right in front. So how come the site costs are up so much?
We can tag team off each one.
Good, yeah.
Each of us, one another, sorry. Well, the fuel cost, for one, is a big driving factor, because that affects not only the operation of the equipment, but the manufacturing of all of the materials that you're using, your concrete structures, your concrete, your pavement, in those areas. That's a big factor here in the increase. We're also looking at the escalation factor that we're using alone is 6.5 per year. So we're going 2.5 years, or a year and a half on that. So that's about 9.25%. So that's going to have an effect on your total number as well for your site work. But if we're comparing hard to hard, I shouldn't be using escalation. Some of the other factors we were talking about was manpower. There's a real shortage of manpower, and when that happens, people are less aggressive as far as we're concerned, and time. We looked at this estimate. We've gone through both of them. Across the board, we're seeing increases. We can't necessarily explain it. We can pinpoint the big items. It's very similar to the big items that we're facing with in every one of our households, is the energy costs and the fuel costs. I'm not saying that's $300,000, but it's a portion, it's a factor for it.
It just seemed like a lot, Rick and Joel, at $385K, $386K, that's 32% increase. That's a sizable increase for site development. So I'm still scratching my head a little bit on that one. And then just total owner's development costs up 21%. I mean, that's you and us a bit, if you will. It's architect and engineering fees, OPM and site clerk fees, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm tickled that you got real furniture and furnishings bids. I think that's really important to nail that down. And then your Wi-Fi, AV, and IT stuff quotes, I should say, are based on current projects as well. So those are real numbers. But I'm dying to put this out to bid, because I just can't believe the site costs are going to be up 32%. But again, I'm not in the business, but it just seems like a lot of money. And then that's really the questions I had and the comments I wanted to make. And I am going to turn it to Mr. Shell and then Mr. Nicastro and then over to so I know Mr. Shell is really excited about the project. Mr. Shell.
I'm chomping at the bit. So I just have one kind of technical question that was prompted by your introduction, and then I do have a few comments that imply questions. You mentioned that you had two cost estimators, but we really only have one set of numbers. Did you average them, or how did you put those together into a single proposal?
What we did is we used the PSMG, we had the two estimates reconciled to a number that the estimators agreed on. So the CHA estimate that we're using as a benchmark has been reconciled based on the input that we got from the other estimator, so that two eyes are better than one, and it helps to, and incidentally, both estimators had the same site work costs. It was the site work for the two estimates was extremely close. So that's how it was done. It was reconciled, and that's part of the reason why the number that you got on Friday is different than the number you got today, because Friday afternoon and Saturday and Sunday, the estimators were working and refining these estimates based on what the other person found.
Did the site work number changed?
The site work number did come down from,
Was 1.8 before. it came
Yes,
down.
okay, yes, I'm sorry,
And,
yes, okay, yep.
that came
Yep,
down.
okay.
Yep.
Okay, good, good. Well, let me just make a few comments, and I have some of the kinds of questions that that Jeff asked, but I want to start by saying two things. One, I like the project. I think this is a very good project for Chatham. The related question on cost and projecting a number is, obviously, you know better than I do, is if it's anything, it's an art, not a science, and it's subject to a lot of uncertainties. As somebody once said, predicting the future is subject to a lot of uncertainties. But some of these numbers, and I'm just going to mention these. If you want to comment on any of them, that's fine. But I really just want to kind of put this out there that we have some pretty eye-popping percentage increases. The escalation factor itself is up 120%. And I realize that in some ways is not quite how you would look at it, but total construction costs up 28%, architect up 20, the OPM and site clerk fees up 28, and then we get down into the smaller numbers. But at the end of the day, we're looking at an increase overall of approaching 30%. And you've made a case for that. I understand it. I'll just mention, for example, I've seen at least one study of where construction costs are and where they, where they appear to be headed, or where somebody's forecasting they're going to be headed. That says, 2022 is about 14 or 15%, and maybe next year, for a whole bunch of reasons, particularly being off of a higher level, is likely to normalize. And I you can comment on that or not as you see fit. That comment really addresses the 6.5% that you put in there, on top of some other, let's call it safety factors, if you will. I would also note that we had, in our review of other capital projects, a couple of cases that, actually looking at the two phases of the transfer station, right, thank you very much. One of which was 19% from sometime in 2020 to first quarter of 23, and the other of which was from a little later, 21, I think third quarter of 21 into present time of 11%. I offer those not to quarrel with you, but just as a kind of a support for my proposition that it's an art, not a science, it's judgment. I appreciate that you want to give us a number that that's going to be, assuming it's approved, will give us enough money to get the project done. I think the last thing I'll say, and then I would invite your comments on all of it. I think you presented to us in August three sets of numbers with respect to variations on the theme of building the Center for Active Living, either where the present site is, knocking that down and building a new building there, doing something, a couple of different alternatives at the community center. All of the largest number of square feet that you were looking at was 9,200. And all of those numbers were in the roughly $10 million range. You had high and low, and if you average them, you're pretty close to $10 million. I guess maybe, I mean, if you increase those pro rata by the difference in square footage, you're up and probably beyond the numbers that we have here. You might want to comment on just kind of that comparison. I would offer that also as for the community, a kind of a support for the proposition that wherever you're going to build this, you're going to be spending $10 or $11 million or something in that vicinity. There's not a shortcut here, I don't think, to knocking $1 million or $2 million off the cost of this project. And I would invite your comment on that as well. Thank you.
All right, I hope I got it all. I believe the first component was more talking about the fees, the architectural and the OPM fees, and the reason for the increase. I can speak for my costs, and I know that back in 2020 and in 2021, we were working extra hard to get a budget. We had a target that we had to meet, and we were cutting just about everything across the board, including construction costs and architectural engineering fees and OPM fees. This time around, we both did the exercise of looking at the project from a schedule perspective and really what is the fee? What is the true fee? And that's what you're seeing here. I can speak to mine. We've based this on going out to bid at a certain period of time, and we have somewhere between 12 to 13 months of construction and about 2 months of closeout and move and all of those things. And that's where the most of my money is, because we'll be representing this project with full-time staff on the job for that duration, as well as project managers. And we use a chart and a formula for calculating our fees based upon man-hour and expected man-hours per week. And we extend it over the duration of the project. And when I was going back and looking at it, I compared it to my fee that we had generated for the fire station back in 2015. It's almost identical. My rates have gone up a little bit, but our manpower projections and everything else, I'd be more than glad to share that with you. And I know that Joel has gone through and done the same exercise with his engineers and what he requires to complete the project. And the truth is, everything has gone up. And it's just, and it's the way we looked at this is let's just put down what the real figures are across the board. So that's what we did. And Joel, you're more than able to jump in on that if you want. As far as, well, please.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. As far as the percentage, it's anybody, you can go online and look up the percentages, industry standards across the board. Every indicator has different variables for each year. Some years are flat, some years are excessive. That's why I gave you the example of the fire station. If you take that 8 years, and the fire station costs from 2015 to today, or when we received our bids, you'll see that the average escalation exceeded even what the industry is saying. So we have barometers for that. We watch it. I think even between 20 and 21, it was relatively flat, but there was some serious increases between 2021 and 22 and 23. So we have to base it upon what we see in the industry, what our estimators see in the industry, and what we're seeing in our bids, and that's what we're presenting to you today. It doesn't do us any good to present you something that is going to fail. We want to be as you can set a number right now and tell us to design and bid and build it by, but if the bids come in over budget because of the number that you set, it doesn't really fare for the community. So what we're trying to do is present something that's going to help this project move forward. The other thing is, the chairman mentioned or suggested, or didn't even suggest, but you were saying it in your conversation, and I had started earlier with a bid in hand. We find communities who do not trust the numbers, do not trust the numbers at all. So they want to see a bid before they make a final vote. That's an option. It gives you more credibility with the taxpayer, can say, here's the number. But I feel that we've done a good job of getting this estimate in line to give you a safe budget to follow. Comparing against what we did last fall, I just don't think is rational at this point. We certainly can go through the exercise and look at those estimates, but we had several different options, one of which was a purpose-built building with a demolition aspect to it, and in other words, tearing down temporary facilities. So I don't think we're comparing apples to apples. We certainly can go through and do the exercise, but we would have to be adding certain difficulty factors in different areas to make sure that we're comparing it completely. One of the aspects that you might want to throw out there is that if you were ever to go forward with this project, you're going to have an asset that either you're going to reuse or you're going to liquidate. Maybe that goes towards this budget. That a lot of communities follow that concept, because even if you're going to reuse it for something else, that means that you needed space in another department or another service. And if you didn't have that facility, you'd maybe be buying a property and developing something. So maybe there's some value in that, in putting that towards the equation. Excuse me. I don't know if I covered everything for you.
No, I think you did. I just have two additional things I want to just mention quickly. First of all, I did not intend to negotiate your fees with you. I appreciate
It's
your
okay.
comments, but.
It's a hard concept to get, so we're more than
I
glad
was
to
just
talk
running
about it.
down the list and percentages, so, no, the question I have is, I think I may have lost the question here as I was addressing that one. I'll come back to it.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rick. The concept of an asset, I think, is a good one. In this particular instance, you're going to hear about it, I'm sure. Other folks are going to speak to it, but their current site is being considered, will be considered strongly for affordable housing going forward. So we have on the back end, it is a win-win for, I think, our seniors and our housing challenge that we're facing. So the reuse of the current site is, I think, very important to the overall formula, the equation for value here for the town. And I look upon both investments as extremely long-term, 40 years. I look at this building as a 40-year investment for our seniors, and given the nature of our demographic, and given the way it's played out over the last decade or two, Chatham is the last I knew was the second oldest community in the Commonwealth, other than Orleans, and has considerable demand for services for our elderly and for adult daycare as well. So, and then on the other side, our number one challenge, I think, is affordable and attainable housing for our citizens, for our community. And we're challenged. We're making some headway there, but we're challenged. And I think having Stony Hill available for affordable and attainable housing going forward is another value add here for the town. So it's really a win-win. But it's a very interesting concept that you brought up, and I think it's an important one as we go forward. And Mr. Nicastro had his hand up, and then Ms. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the presentation. I have a few questions, but I guess I'll start with a comment, because, Rick, you were talking about how you can't really compare apples to apples when you look at what you did last fall, and as Mr. Schell suggested, the average of those options was somewhere in the range of 10 million. But I agree you can't. I guess I would just say that from the standpoint of the taxpayer, I think there are two questions that they ask. What are we spending, and what's the end result? And is the end result here, as proposed, better than the end result in the other options for something that's approximately in the same price range? For me, this is a better result. And I do appreciate, and I think it's advantageous to everyone in the town, that we get an honest estimate, that we not try to knock it down just to sell it. I think people need to know. You mentioned the fire station. I thought you were going to go in a particular direction, but I wanted to ask the question because I've forgotten the numbers. But the fire station was rejected, and then we had a committee appointed, and you worked on it. And as I recall, it was downsized, was it not?
Yes, it was.
By how much, do you remember?
I wish
Okay, that's all
I
right.
had done more research. I
But
should have been smart enough to think
That's
of
all
that.
right.
But
the
yes, it
cost-
was downsized.
But the cost went up.
That's correct.
So
That's why it was
and
downsized.
This is not unique to me. We've heard it numerous times. We spent more money for less
Correct.
because it was rejected. This could have been built for 8.6 back in 2021, okay? I heard the chairman of the Fed today, he was before the House, and they're still very concerned about inflation. You know, we're hoping it's going down, but he doesn't think it's going down fast enough. And that means interest rates are going to continue to rise. In the memo, our finance director says that our financial advisors are recommending that we clock in interest at 4.5% for 20 years. Maybe that works, I don't know. You can get 5% on a treasury today. So I guess the point I want to make is that delay costs money. And I think that the community has to decide, do we want a new senior center? Do we want a new center for active living or not? I guess I come down on the side that I want one. So a couple of questions. Joel, the adult day care room, are you thinking that it's going to be the 800 square foot room or the 1,000? Because we've talked about 800 since that's the size of the room at the Orleans Center.
Yes, you could use either one of the rooms. We thought it would be the 800 square foot room, but it's,
Yeah.
the reason for doing that was that the larger program room could be divided into two then for two smaller rooms. And not to get into the weeds, but the 800 square foot room is the furthest away from the doors, and that tends to be something that we want for the adult care program is the best security.
Is there a concern that it's on the second floor? Because I had someone email me a month or so ago about this.
That comes up as a question frequently, and the staff are trained, the people in the adult care are not immobilized. It's better to be on the second floor from a security point of view because the opportunity to get out a door is much more difficult, and that's the bigger concern in our adult care program. So Situate just went through the same decision on their building, and there's a similar idea. Future program is on the second floor. So I know people are concerned, what do you do in the case of an emergency? The building's fully sprinkled. It's very easy to get out the building. There's alarms, so it's a very safe building. The thing that's a little bit more difficult to manage is the wandering of memory care adults, and that's why they generally get up on the second floor.
Do you have a laser pointer with you?
Yes.
So
I'm going to go to the bigger
people can
plan,
see-
sorry.
Yeah, I wanted you to stay on that,
Okay.
just to point out where it is and where its proximity to the stairwell.
The stairwell is here and right here, and so the adult daycare door is right opposite the second fire escape. And then you take that down and you're right outside of the building. So that was done on purpose.
And where's the elevator?
The elevator is right here, so
Okay.
they would come up here, down the hallway, and in.
And you were saying that if you put the adult daycare in that room, that the room next to it, that program room, which is right now 1,000 square feet, you could have dividers in there and have,
Well,
Use it doubly.
we had envisioned that this room could have a divider in it, and you'd have two smaller rooms. The reason I liked leaving that as a program room is that the corridor allowed you to get into either half of that room if we wanted to subdivide it, whereas if we're down at the end, it's harder to subdivide that room and get folks into one half or the other. So when I was saying in the beginning, there's some program adaptations we do when we do adult daycare. One of them is to put that room where it is so that this room is more flexible and has 2 entries. And there are a couple other tricks that we do.
Could you go back to the elevation slide and show where the adult daycare room is? I think it was in the lower left.
In the perspective, it's right in this corner.
Okay.
In the elevation, it's in this corner, and then this is the door on the back side that is, you come out. Now, that door would be an alarmed door, so they couldn't get into it unless there was a fire. So again, that's it.
So where is the room itself?
The room itself is right here.
So that door is up, and the door on the east elevation is on the opposite side of the building?
The stair comes down, you come out of, the room is right here, you come out of the room, go down the stair and out the back side.
Okay. When we discussed this model and other models as COVID was emerging and burgeoning, we talked about having a fairly sophisticated air filtration system. Is that still part of this plan?
Yes, sir.
And what about the HVAC system? I bring it up because we just okayed sending, and the Finance Committee approved it today, a $2 million new HVAC system for the library. What kind of system is envisioned in the design here or concept here or
Well,
numbers?
Terry had shared the new energy requirements for Chatham, and this complies. Rick had mentioned, we've had a couple of energy code upgrades. We're having another one in July of this year. The building always had been designed to meet those requirements from the HVAC side, not some of the other requirements. So we have a all-electric, no fossil fuel heating and cooling system. Each room is on a separate zone, so the senior adult care could be on heat if you wanted to have this room on air conditioning. This could be at 76, that could be at 72, or whatever temperature you want. So it's a very flexible program that's all of our, and most every senior center in the state uses now because it's so optimal. The main multi-purpose room has a similar system, and it's designed to be 2 separate rooms with a divider wall in the middle. So again, that room is separately zoned from this side, and you can have 2 completely different programs, which we think is very important, because if you give this program over to adult care, now you're going to have more programming in the multipurpose room. So we really want to get that a robust system, but it's fossil fuel free.
That's the VRF heat pump
Yes.
system, right? Yeah. So it's the VRF heat pump system.
Well, so the question I have is, I hope Mr. Wirtschafter is watching, because I supported the heat pump system at the library, and I'm going to be supporting them here too. I guess this question might be put to Terry, and maybe Joel, you have an answer to it. Is there any federal grant funding or state funding available for this heat pump system? Because we've talked about that at the library, and we thought we might be eligible for something, either under something that's currently pending or under the Inflation Reduction Act.
Yeah, very quickly, and Joel might have to jump in, but typically on new construction, you know, the grants, for instance, for the library, when you're transitioning from, you know, going from less efficient to more efficient, they are there. I am exploring a couple of USDA options and a couple of other things. I didn't hear back from anybody today, but I don't know if Joel, on the new building versus, you know, the subsidies or you know, offsets that are available are typically, you know, in those channels are typically with retrofits or change outs.
And we haven't been receiving any federal grants. The best we've been able to do is work with Cape Light and get rebates in the order of $50,000 to $100,000, depending on the size of the buildings.
Because
our
We
best.
thought we might be able to get as much as $500,000 from the Cape Light, right?
Right, and that was built
The
on
library.
because you have that baseline versus, so on a tonnage change and efficiencies. But, you know, as we've done with our other buildings and Rick and not so much Joel on the design of the other ones, but again, typically, as soon as we get into design development, we start we initiate discussion with Cape Light Compact to get them in early in the process, to identify the equipment, and, you know, they usually have some sense of what we're gonna get, and then typically, at the end of the project, when they come in and inspect, that everything's installed, and maybe Rick could comment on that, but that's what we've done, and at least with the, going back to the, as far back as this building and the police station as well. We dialed Cape Light Compact in right as we were developing the HVAC narratives.
That's correct. Thank you, Terry. And we're in the process of closing out Sandwich now, so I don't know what the rebate there will be, but they do play a very active role, and that's the only subsidy that we've been able to find at this point.
What are you estimating the HVAC system in this building will cost? Do you have a number from that?
Give me a second.
Yeah, sure. While you're checking that, let me ask you, Rick, what is the consequence of going with a 5% contingency versus a 7.5%, which?
The problem is we don't have a crystal ball as to what things are gonna look like in a year and a half or 2 years. We also, I don't think we've done any full investigations, but it's just an additional buffer for the client. If you don't need it, you don't spend it. Then you're just writing down your total project cost. But, you know, at this stage in the project, in the early concept, which we're at right now, there's always going to be things coming up at our job meetings, and someone's going to come up with a great idea. We'd like to see this piece of equipment added that we hadn't planned on. Or can we you know, add a bank of bathrooms for the adult day area that are separate from everything else? Those types of design changes, we would be reviewing those with the client and presenting our thoughts and comments and options. But you would be feeding off of that contingency for those types of components as you go through. Then at the end of the day, you know, after we're out to bid, and your bid comes in 6.7% lower than, or 8% lower than what the estimate value was, you're just throwing a boatload of money back into the contingency. And the fire station, you know, we didn't spend all of the budget. We returned money back at the end of the job. So it's just that safety net for you.
Okay, thank you. Joel, did you find the number?
The rounded number is $650,000 for the heating, ventilation, and cooling. So that's everything that goes in. And in addition to the VRF system, there's a fresh air makeup that is an energy recovery, high efficiency system to bring fresh air into the building.
Does that include the filtration piece?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I have no more questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Nicastro. You know, the cost of the HVAC for a new building certainly is going to be less than an older building, especially when there's other things we're doing in the library, many other things we're doing in the library, so really, but I could see where you were going there, Dean, and thank you. Ms. Davis?
We've had a lot of questions here that my questions were on the site costs and the owner's development, like everybody else's here, and the deep concern. So I pretty much just have comments about the value of this to the neighborhood, and I really feel that repurposing the 193 is like an offset cost. It just appears to me. I don't know if that's a term for it, because I'm not an accountant, but I think that lends a solid value to the investment into this project. And we know that seniors are living, you know, longer, they're more active, and this center would have far more value to our senior population, to what they are currently dealing with, as well as this, as I said, being an asset to the community. USDA Rural Development Grants the Energy Program is really good, and it does engage the municipalities, it offers municipalities opportunities. I don't know of any other, just because I that's some of the work that I do. But it's worth exploring on that energy side, especially as the push in construction for the country is going in that direction. I think we're going to see more of this happening along the way as far as grant opportunities for our communities. This has a lot of value. The conservative estimate, I guess that's the way we go. We don't, you don't try to trick us. You're being honest with us. We need to know what the real value is to what we're going to be dealing with. So I'm still extremely excited and very supportive of this project.
Thank you, Shereen. Mr. Shell has a comment.
Yeah, just a quick question. I'll reserve some comments after we hear from the public as well, but I remember the question. Can you give us a little bit of a sense of, and this comes under the heading in my mind of art versus science, of the change from the first go-round to, I guess, 3 o'clock this afternoon? That was around $475,000 that came down. I love it, but how did that get developed?
I'll start on that. Back in 2020, we poured through that site estimate, and we made a lot of changes and reductions, and we had coastal engineering doing some quantitative takeoffs for us as well. And that caused the number to come down, and that was what was presented back in 2020, the reduced item. We didn't necessarily value engineer items out or reduce the items, but we just made sure that all of the quantities matched up. We also changed the rear retaining wall to a segmented block retaining wall rather than a cast-in-place concrete retaining wall. Unfortunately, when the estimator jumped back into it this time around, they didn't take those same values and carry them forward. They were going back and they looked at the original quantities and the original design of the retaining wall. So once Joel caught that, he had them modify that back, and that was a substantial number. But we spent, I don't know how much time we spent on that site work drilling that, back 3 years ago, and I think we're pretty close to where we need to be.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Joel. I'm going to open it up now to the folks here in the room, Mr. Oppenheim, and then Barbara Siegel.
David Oppenheim. As you know, a few years ago, I was on part of a group that wanted stepping stones looked at, and it was rejected, and that's turned out great because now it's going to be housing, which is a better use. So we have lost some time, and it's going to cost more money. I'm very supportive of this for several reasons. One, I think it will meet the needs of the seniors. I'm glad Mr. Marsh offered the property back again. That was very generous. It's going to cost what it's going to cost. I'm hopeful that maybe things will settle down. I don't know. I do a lot of constructing, and it's anybody's guess what's going to happen. I think this has been studied to death, and it's time, much like we've talked about other things, let's put it to bed. The real selling point on this, from my perspective, and a lot of the people that I talk to, especially younger people, who, why are we going to spend $10 or $11 million on something like this? Is that we're going to do something for everybody in community. My opinion, one person said to me, why would we do this when they already have a place, when there are people that don't have any place? And that's a reasonable thing to do, but we're attacking it from that standpoint. By having a companion article for the repurposing of 193, to me, is the biggest selling point for me and for many people in this town. As Mr. Dykens said, or it was brought up by Mr. Pomeroy, there is value. I'm not gonna worry about what we might do with the senior center in 40 years. I won't be here. But I can tell you, I don't want to see 193, which we own. I don't want to see that studied after it's. If we do the companion article, which I think should be as tightly bound to this thing as possible. And if this thing goes through, which I do believe it will, and I believe with the repurposing of 193, the present senior center, it'll go through with a much greater majority than even the 2/3 that's necessary. It's my opinion that you can probably get 8 or more apartments out of that property. I think that renovating that property into apartments is a lot less expensive than tearing down and building a new, basically commercially public building. You can have ground floor accessible apartments there. You don't need all the parking spaces are there. I think you've got a foundation, you've got site work, there's a lot of things that can do it. So we're taking, in my opinion, and it's a guesstimate, I would say the value of that property that we own it and the savings on renovating that into a residential use as opposed to something like this, I would say that that reduces the cost by a minimum of $2 million, maybe more. I don't know. I'm not sure you could put a defined amount. But more importantly, it's good planning by this town. We study this, we study that, and this is, people talk about comprehensive plans. This is actually a comprehensive plan. We're going to build something that the seniors need and deserve, and I expect that they will make great use of it. And I'll touch on one more thing on that in a second. But at the same time, while the building's being built, we can have our designs done. We can be shovel-ready, so the day they close the doors and move it to the new place, we start construction and can probably have apartments in less than a year for people to live in. I believe housing is the most important and most trying thing in this town. I've been living here for over 50 years now, and I was on the finance committee in the 70s with Dougie Bowman and Harvey Huter, and you know, we talked about not affordable housing, available housing, year-round housing in the 70s, and nothing, it's just gotten worse and worse and worse. Compliments to the town, we've taken aggressive action. I mean, we've bought stuff, we have stuff, we're repurposing stepping stones. Hopefully going to repurpose the water department. We should be repurposed because that makes economic sense. When you talk about effects on taxpayers, that's the best effect on taxpayers. So we don't leave things rotting, we get things and repurpose them into things that are viable and meet the needs of the community. One other thing that's happening, and I can't get into it much, nothing's been finally decided. I've been meeting with the Friends of the Council on Aging. I don't know all the new names now. And they are on board, and we will be having our first meeting to see how great a fundraise we can do to contribute to this in some fashion. What form that would take, I don't know, but I think people are getting very excited. We're going to be meeting with a professional who is known all over the Cape for fundraising for some of the more successful nonprofits, and I think it's fair to say that we will be making an aggressive fundraising campaign to contribute, whether it's capital, whether it's enhancements, whether it's for programs going down the road. We'll be back to this board at some, and how that money will be used would be subject to discussion by the selectmen and the finance committee, et cetera. But that again, that's starting. We're having our first productive, we've had 3 meetings now, and we're moving forward with it, and the subcommittee set up, and we're meeting with people. This is the best. You know, it's sort of like when we talked about when I was here yesterday and we were talking about doing the trees at the airport. You can fight, you can argue everything, or you can solve the problem. You know, when the whole thing came a year ago, people, right or wrong, didn't trust the process. I can tell you I trust this process right now. I will support this process. I will support it and I will support the senior center, period. But I hope that that it's tied very closely and almost, if not contingent upon, very closely on the repurposing of 193. Because now you're giving something to the whole community. You're meeting 2 needs, the needs of the seniors and the needs and more housing. And somebody said, I think at the selectmen's meeting yesterday, that maybe we have too many things going. We should get as many things going as we can. As many apartments going as we can, as much housing as we can. So on the basis of the 3-pronged attack, I strongly urge you to support this. I'd love to see a town meeting. I don't know the process and whether it can be done. I'd like to see the companion article discussed with this so that everybody understands at town meeting, you're getting it all. And we're doing it all, and we're going to do it all at once. And I think that would be that's the win. So thank you.
Okay, David, thank you. Well said. Great to have you aboard. Okay, Barbara Siegel.
There was a question about the fire station. My recollection, Terry, was that the fire station, the first town meeting when it was turned down, the second time around, it was 1,000 square feet smaller, and it was $1 million more.
Barbara, that's it? Okay. All right. Who are you? Please, come up to the microphone, Julie.
Hello, my name's Julie Dykens, and I just want to say I agree with both the former speakers, but I have a question with respect to the financing that I can see myself wondering at town meeting. At what point is the cost certain before it goes to the voters? Is it certain at that point, the cost of the project? And I have a second question.
Well, Julie, you want me to answer? I think it's really when you put it out to bid and you get a bid that you can accept and trust, I think, is Jill, you know.
For town meeting, though, we won't be going to bid yet, but that's where all the contingencies come in. As the OPM said, if we don't need them, they won't be spent, and that won't count towards the borrowing. So
Okay.
it's a very strong concept to get us to those
All right.
estimates.
I mean, as you go around town and people talk about these issues, I'd like to have an answer. My other question is simply, in the plans I looked at, the upstairs had 800 square feet for the memory center, memory unit?
Adult day. Yeah,
Is that
yeah,
correct?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. So that seems kind of small to me, and I can see myself there already. Is it able to be expanded, or is that a small space for memory disabled people?
Joel?
Just curious.
I think Joel can answer that. And can always cannibalize into 1,000 square feet.
Thank you. Thanks.
We sized it based on sort of staffing needs, that as you go above a certain size, you need double the staff. So part of the reason you don't want it to get too large is staffing. The size of the room is 50 square foot larger than the adult care facility that we did in the Andover Senior Center for a
Much larger town.
bigger population, but a senior population similar to this. So it's, and the Situate ended up at 800 square foot as well for their, so it's a number that's pretty common.
Okay, thank you, Joel. Dean has a follow-up.
Yeah, just want to add to that. I think I mentioned it earlier, the center in Orleans, the adult daycare room is 800 square feet from what I'm told. Leah is nodding in agreement. And that's the room where that's the center where we send Chatham people. We pay a nominal amount for that. So that seems to be working.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Joel. I think Mr. Wickham had his hand up, and then looked like Mr. Bystrom had his hand up as well.
Forgot to get, how to get to the podium. First of all, I'd like to thank the Select Board for the opportunity to revisit 1610 Main Street. I believe there is a consensus in our community to build a new center for active living, and the best site is 1610 Main Street in the West Chatham Village Center. We have a lot to be proud of in Chatham. As a community, we have supported each other in many ways. We have built schools, playgrounds, and fields, a community center, public safety facilities, a wastewater treatment plant, a town hall annex, and several waterfront infrastructures, all for the benefit of each and every one of us, whether we use that particular facility or not. This is our third attempt at a regular town meeting to build a facility for our that our senior citizens deserve. On May 13th, 2019, Middle Road was proposed for 6.6. On June 12th, 2021, 1610 was proposed for 8.3, and tonight I wasn't here to hear the figure, but I'm sure it's increased as many of us had expected. So what's the difference between now and 2021? Well, first off, there's a new name. It's the Center for Active Living. Secondly, there are no competing sites. I think that was it was hard to choose one site over another, and that's why we only got a majority, not the supermajority. The adult daycare center that I wasn't able to hear the presentation wasn't part of that original plan. We had a room or a space that could be expanded to that, but I think that's a very important component of what we're doing now. And we're going to we're going to have 2 housing sites if this does go through. As Mr. Oppenheim spoke of the Stony Hill Road site, and we're also getting the competing site for the center last time on Stepping Stones Road. So I just want to encourage the board to keep this active in your discussions and your meetings, and maybe answer all the questions that haven't been answered tonight that I'm sure there are. And your support is very appreciated and very much needed. You're the leaders that we have elected in this town, and I think this is the time to honor our seniors in building this facility. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wickham. Mr. Byström had his hand up, and then I'm going to go online. There were a couple of hands up. I think they've been up and down here.
Good evening. My name is Bill Byström. I think I'm going to join Mrs. Dykens in that memory room because I already forgot what I was going to say. No, basically, when I've listening to all the discussion about the how much it's going to cost, one thing kept coming to my mind. Houses in Chatham sell for more than $10 million. I mean, when you think of it from that point of view, you're going, we're a very wealthy community. There's a lot of money in this town. I'm not sure. Perhaps the town manager could tell me, do we have a total value somewhere in the vicinity of $9 billion? Is that what I heard?
We do, definitely in the billions.
Pardon?
Definitely in the billions, but I would have to look it up, but definitely in the billions.
Okay, so there's a great deal of money in town. The tax rate is extremely low, no matter what we do at town as a result of town meeting. It's around the 5th lowest in the state currently. I don't think any of us could live at the style we live here in any other town on Cape Cod. So basically, we're living a bargain. We're living a bargain in a very nice community. And just like we said the other night about helping the people, the rest of the community, we're a community. And a community implies that you help those that are part of it. There are some people that aren't going to ever need the community center, the senior center, and they'll never go there. But there are people that need that. There will be some people that will need to go to a memory care unit. Right now, I think we send them to Orleans, but that's booked. I mean, there's only so much room. And maybe we should start planning for what we need here and handling our own, looking forward a little bit rather than reacting. And I think this is what it does. I think this is the proposal that it does. One of my favorite movies, they said, build it and they will come. And you know, a lot of people, when I talk to people, and I go, have you ever been to the Council on Aging now? Or I'm sorry, Center for Active Living. They say, no, I wouldn't go there. It's the pits. And really, they're serious about that. And I really think if you produce a little better building that's a little nicer, it will be a little more inviting for some people. And I think that's great. And I think what you people are doing, to echo what David and many other people said tonight, what you're doing is great because it's a win-win. It's a win on the side of the seniors, and follow it through with the Stony Hill Road. It's a win for housing, which we need both. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Byström. I am going to go to Pat Burke, who has a hand up. I know Rick and Frank have their hands up as well, but I'm going to go to Pat. who's the president of the COA. Pat, please, or the Center for Active Living, sorry.
Yes, and chairperson, not president.
Chairperson, okay,
I'm
yep, sorry.
President speaking.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry I couldn't be there. I'm ending a bout of COVID-19. What luck for me. But what I would like to say, and I would like to thank Mr. Byström for his comments, because when I speak about the Chatham Center for Active Living, I speak about it mostly as a service organization. And what I think we need to remember, and the community at large needs to remember, is we service a multitude of people. I don't even think anyone has a concept. I know Leah has numbers, and we can give you all of the numbers, but I can tell you that when I think of the Chatham Center for Active Living as a service organization, I put it on the same plane as the fire station, the police station, the Chatham Center for Active Living. We were the first town on the Cape to set up a program where seniors at risk, we would have a list of those names between the Chatham Center for, well, it was Council on Aging at that time, and the police station and the fire station. And every Monday morning, there's a call that goes through to see if any of those elders at risk have required a police service, fire service, or any kind of outreach service. So you don't know you need it until you need it. And I can't implore you enough to really sit down and think about it. And this is the best place to meet the needs of the Chatham Center for Active Living. One last thing on the adult day health. I also volunteer as a Shine counselor at the Center for Active Living. And recently a client came in to see me about something, and we were discussing going to Orleans. And the person told me it costs $55 a day for her to send her spouse to Orleans. And then there are only 2 days available. And the other 2 days she was sending the spouse to a place in Brewster that was costing $100 a day. So this is something that people really need in our community, and the Chatham senior community needs it. So I would like to thank the Select Board and Joel and Rick for the tremendous work you've done, and I've talked long enough. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Pat. Well said. And I'm going to go online here to Mr. Levitt, Rick Levitt, please. Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The comments tonight, the positive comments by the board and the public, I think have been excellent. And as was wisely earlier said tonight, this is a major town investment. 2 years ago, we were warned that delaying this needed project means higher costs. We shouldn't delay the project any longer. Your board made an exhaustive study of possible sites and concluded this is the ideal site for a center for active living. So was the Chronicle. In a recent editorial, the Chronicle endorsed this site in West Chatham Center for a center for active living. A center for active living should be in an active center. It is a win-win for all of us because it is what our seniors need, as has been clearly discussed tonight, particularly here just a moment ago by Pat. It means affordable housing for Chatham workers at the current COA site. So I encourage you to go forward with this project. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rick. I am going to recognize Frank Messina and then this gentleman out here in the, Frank, Mr. Messina.
Hi. Hi. Thank you very much for recognizing me. Actually, I'm a little disappointed. Everything I was going to say has been said. Really articulated by David Oppenheim and Rick and Pat. Just really, the only thing I'd like to add is to congratulate the Select Board in your fortitude and your courage for, you guys never gave up on this. I'm sure it would have been a hell of a lot easier for you just to put this aside and listen to the naysayers in the community, but you didn't. You kept pressing, and you did a exhaustive search to the other sites, and came up with good logic in terms of how you would select the site. And of course, my good sailing buddy Bill Marsh, thank goodness for him and his family for once again giving us an opportunity to build this facility, the COA. I can't even think about what the new name is. And of course, the tie-in with 193 is just excellent, a real win-win. And I guess I agree with David that hopefully when you finally get around to generating the warrants, that we make it connected in some way, so we can do both. And again, thank you very much. It's time, and enough fooling around with this. As I think David Whitman said, was 6 to 8 to 10. We wait another year or two, it's going to be 2 more. So it's time. Thank you very much, guys.
Okay, Frank, thank you. Well said. Mr. Barry, I believe it is, please.
Good evening. My name is Michael Barry. Actually, I'm on the Friends of the Council on Aging. I'm serving as president this year. I just wanted to respond to a couple of things that previous speakers have mentioned. My wife and I moved here from Framingham about 7 years ago, and we were told by friends of ours in Natick before we arrived down here that go to the Council on Aging, because my wife had dementia at the time. He said, they'll be able to help you out. They have all sorts of resources. So that's one of the first places we went when we came here. And I talked about my situation, and Eva Orman at the time was the outreach coordinator. She said, well, we don't offer anything like adult daycare, which is what you really need, but try Orleans. They might have it. They might have something. I know they have a program there. And if that doesn't work, try Harwich, because the Visiting Nurses Association have a program there. So we went to Orleans, and my wife didn't qualify, because one thing people should understand about these daycare programs is there are levels of care that people need. And if they need a higher level of care than can be provided by non-nurses, for example, then they're not going to qualify for the program. So it's not like this is going to be a type of care that someone gets in a nursing home. This is for people who are lower level dementia. And my wife was beyond that at that point. So we went to the visiting nurses in Harwich, and they had a very small number of, she would have qualified, but they had a very small number of openings, so we were on the waiting list. So I basically continued care in the house. And people are going to find that this is a very important element for a town to provide. So I think that it's an excellent value added to this program. And I think it's a real selling point for the town. Secondly, I was going to mention that when the COA recently was looking for a new receptionist, myself and several members of the board tried to fill in as we could at the front desk. And it was very, very good for me to see the amount of concern and needs that people have. And they called the Council on Aging to see what can be provided. They don't know all the services that are available to them. And when they find out, they're quite pleased and surprised. But I think we have to get better publication of what we're doing, so that people understand that there's something there for everybody, even if it's socialization or whatever, all sorts of programs that are very informative. You don't have to be elderly and need trouble, need help walking and that sort of thing. There are all sorts of programs that they offer, and we need a good facility to provide those. So the other thing I wanted to mention, the third thing, is that when I joined the board a few years ago, we do have a good amount of money in the savings account, and that was always set aside for the time when we could actually invest in a building like this. So we do have some funds that we can invest, and we hope to build on that, and we're very pleased that Dave Oppenheim is going to help us with that. So there's another resource that the town can rely upon. So as far as the costs and all that, I mean, I think this town can afford it. I think we'll have to show that to the taxpayers in order to deal with those people who have a sticker shock. Obviously, every building you look at today is expensive, but when you spread it out over the 40 or 50 years that this building is going to provide services to the town, it's well worth it any way you slice it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barry. Nice to meet you. I had met you before. Any other comments? I have Elaine Gibbs online. Elaine?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. I just wanted to mention that I've been involved on looking at 1610 and other sites for some time. I was on the 1610 working group a number of years ago. I would point out that tonight's meeting, I think you might have had a bigger attendance if many of the people in the public had known about it. It was only posted at 1:16 on Monday, which was 2 days ago, with no advance notice. And it was only briefly mentioned last night. So if the intent of this was to hear from the public at large tonight, I think it would have been helpful if announcements had been made last week. Having said that, I think you probably know my position because I'm concerned about this site, and I don't think the last 2 years have changed that. When 1610 was defeated, the numerous reasons included the location on Route 28, the lot's size, shape, and topography, limiting it to a two-story structure, the size, limited recreational outdoor space, and green space. I still remain concerned about that because as active living, I don't think there's much of that going to be going on outside of this building. So what's changed since then? With the roundabouts completed, we now know that 18-wheelers will be downshifting to enter and exit the eastern roundabout virtually in front of the proposed structure. The noise and fumes from the downshifting and their close proximity to the front of the building at this site, I think, are serious negatives. Seniors attempting to exit the property with parked vehicles on both sides of the driveway, which has an uphill grade onto Route 28, I believe will be challenging and potentially dangerous. The COA is being described as an anchor for the neighborhood, despite the fact that because it's a municipal building, it's going to only be open Monday through Friday from 8 to 4. The site remains 400 feet from the runway protection zone, which has experienced increased charter traffic of Pilatus P-12s that can be heard preparing for takeoff 2 miles away. I can hear them at my house. Constructing a $10 to $11 million municipal building for elderly that close after the last 2 years of discussion regarding the noise and dangers of the RPZ alone should give you pause and rethinking. In terms of the adult daycare, I'm concerned that this is almost an afterthought now to stick it in the room upstairs to make it doable. I think adult daycares should have a lot more planning than that. And I am concerned that they are on the second floor in the event of a fire or a medical emergency. No operating financials have been provided for the legally required full-time medical staff for an adult daycare, potential town liability, and the cost of liability insurance. And again, I think it's important that taxpayers have that information when they're asked to vote on it. Based on the proposed zoning bylaw change that's going on with the planning board, the West Chatham neighborhood is going to have significant increase in density for affordable and attainable housing. The Buckley property alone, directly to the east, could have potentially 50 units with 100 cars entering and leaving multiple times a day. But no traffic studies have been done to study the impact of the increased density based on the rezoning that West Chatham is doing. My problem is people aren't talking to each other here. The planning board's doing their thing, affordable housing is doing theirs, and we have the Council on Aging, and they all impact each other. That kind of increased traffic is going to further impact the ability for seniors to get in and out of 1610. And I think the site costs, nothing is really free. I think a lot of the site costs of that 1.8 million or 1.5, whatever it is now, is because of the topography of the land. It is going to take considerable funds to raise that elevation because of the dramatic slope down towards the water. Interest rates are, the interest rates being used are a maximum of 4.5% for 20-year bond is what I believe was in the packet, when it's currently at 3.75. That's only estimating 0.75 of a point increase by the time we go for the full bonding. And based on the Fed chair's statements last night before the Senate, he's unequivocally signaled that there are going to be multiple and significant rate hikes to stem inflation and increase unemployment. Interest rates, including municipal bonds, I think will likely continue to rise before we break ground. And we have no crystal ball as to what the rates are going to be. They could be substantial, particularly if the feds don't know. I think these cost projections are prohibitively expensive in this economic environment. With these unknowns, it should be of even more concern. I am not opposed to a council on aging, but I am opposed to it at this site. The donor, there were a couple other things in terms of the agreement. The donor agreement stated that only after town meeting approves the council on aging will the donor staff and select board address the prospective use restrictions of the property in more detail. It won't be town meeting. Town meeting, I don't think, should be asked to vote before we know what the terms of the actual restrictions on the property are going to be moving forward. And one of my recommendations, if you, I assume, are going to vote to proceed, I think it would be far more palatable and expedient for town meeting to be offered a companion article that, should the Council on Aging fail, that the land will be donated to the town to be used for other neighborhood municipal uses, whether it be open space, affordable housing, or another purpose, and with full disclosure of that option before town meeting, and to avoid having to come back to town meeting to accept that donation for other municipal purposes should the Council on Aging fail. Over the last year, the public's been repeatedly told that 1610 was a non-starter and off the table. Yet since last August through December, negotiations have apparently been going on without the public knowledge. And to me, it explains why no serious work was done or consideration given to use a portion of the 22,000 square feet community center last fall. I believe that the community center is still a viable option. It is multiple stories, which people didn't like, but that's exactly what we've got at 1610. And I believe it's a scheduling issue. Had we been brought into the discussion last summer or even last fall, many of these concerns could have been discussed and this board would have a better sense of whether or not 1610 is going to pass. Instead, it's sort of a fire drill because next week the warrant closes. So I would ask you, if you proceed despite the significant site negatives, costs, and unknowns, I urge you and the donor to provide an article for the land donation for town meeting in the event the Council on Aging fails at this site. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Elaine. A lot to unpack there. I see Gloria and then Rick Levitt. Gloria Freeman.
Good evening. Yes, it's Gloria Freeman. I would like to repeat some of the comments I made at the 2021 town meeting regarding a new Council on Aging facility at 1610 Main Street. So little has changed, my comments remain relevant, but they are hard to make, and I hope you understand that. I believe it is the wrong building, too big with 2 stories, shoehorned in on the property. In the wrong place, on a lot which, because of its size, shape, and topography, is clearly too small and has a significant slope at the back. At the wrong time, when the town is facing huge expenses, needing new wells in addition to many other water issues, housing, and continuation of the sewer system, and for the wrong reasons, feelings of being entitled to an expansive and expensive building because Chatham has built oversized and underutilized buildings in the past. I believe, and I've said this at every public meeting over the years, that the COA should have a new, more appropriate place than what they have now. It is clearly inadequate. When town meeting did not approve the COA at 1610 Main Street, I hoped something less imposing financially and structurally might be considered, and that there would possibly be a willingness to utilize or share space in other municipal buildings. The Chatham Elementary School seemed like a possibility, with the potential of only 53 Chatham students in the next school term. And we never received an adequate feasibility study of the use of the community center. So none of that happened, and we are faced with an almost exact replica to which town meeting said no 2 years ago. I find it hard to believe that you are putting yourselves through this without any attempt to make changes, and tying yourself to the gift of 1610 might not be helpful either. Of course, Chatham should accept the gift of land, but why tie the success and future of a senior facility to that gift? I have heard a select board member state that this project is now or never. It doesn't have to be. There is the possibility of a new building on the existing property, or the future use of the community center with or without a small addition. And possibly the Chatham Elementary School might become an option at some time. I had hoped you would give us a reason for voting for a new center for active living by taking town meeting's disapproval to heart and working to provide something less expansive and expensive. I'm disappointed that, once again, I cannot support your project. I'm sorry, and it isn't easy to do. Thank you.
Next up is Rick Levitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very brief. Like you, I live very close to the roundabouts in West Chatham. I don't hear any road noise that was spoken of by a previous speaker here tonight, and I don't imagine you do either. Roadway improvements in West Chatham Center were made to handle traffic much more safely than before, and they are today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Levitt. I don't see anybody else with their hands up on virtual land, nor do I see anybody present with their hands up. I'm going to turn it back to the Select Board at this point. Mr. Nicastro has his hand up, and then we'll go around the horn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the comments from members of the public. I just want to make two final comments. It's been pointed out by one of the speakers that the value of the property at 193 Stony Hill Road probably is in the vicinity of $2 million if it were developed. And if you add that together with the $1 million value of the site that is being donated to us, that's like having a $3 million trade-in when you buy a car. You give up your old car, the seniors giving up their old building for this, and it's sort of a metaphorical application against the $10 million plus price. I think that the addition of the adult daycare, which has been talked about on multiple occasions at the Council on Aging and elsewise, is a significant plus. Almost every family in America is touched by dementia. I've had it in my own family. And I think the addition of this is a significant benefit. I'm the liaison to the Council on Aging. I've been on this train since 2015. I intend to remain on it until this project is completed. So I know others may want to speak, but I'd like to put a motion on the table, Mr. Chairman, that I think we have already placed this article. Jill? No. We have not placed the article?
You have to place.
So I first would move that we place a debt exclusion article on the warrant for the 2023 annual town meeting to fund facility design and construction funding for a new Center for Active Living facility at 1610 Main Street with a total project budget contingency percentage of 5% for, I guess there's a new.
It's 10,419,852, Dean.
Okay, I'll take
$10,419,000.
Take that number.
At 5%.
Okay, so that's my first motion. But others may wish to speak.
So you're not including anything at 7.5%?
I'm going to second the motion. I'd like to speak before we vote, but I'd also like to ask Mr. Nicastro, particularly in light of your very eloquent articulation of the trade-in value that we have working for us, to consider the higher contingency, the 7.5%.
That's fine. I think it just has to say one or the other. So I'll amend it to, I'll amend my motion to 7.5% for
10,667,944. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you seconded it.
I did second it.
Okay. All right. Further discussion? Ms.
I'm
Davis.
fine, no, I'm fine with that.
Mr. Shell.
If I may, I'll try to be brief. And Dean has articulated what I'll call, he called trade-in value. I call subsidies from various sources. I think there are uncertainties. There are always uncertainties. I mean, a year ago, if we'd been talking about this, we would have had a different set of uncertainties that actually today didn't turn out to be as bad as they seemed they were going to be a year ago. As I said before, it's hard to predict the future. But at some point, you really do have to say, we've, as David Oppenheim said, we've studied this, we've considered it, we've taken into account all of the factors, and it's time to make a decision. I think it really, to be honest, I think if we're honest, we will recognize that if we do not do this project here this year, it is highly unlikely that Chatham will get a Center for Active Living anytime in the lifetime, probably of anybody in the room. And I think that is an independent reason to say, can we get comfortable with these uncertainties? Have we evaluated them? And I think the experts, Rick and Joel, gave us, I mean, we pushed them a little bit on their approach to this. They acknowledged the uncertainties, but at the same time, they gave us a good basis to feel that we have numbers here that we can be, if not comfortable, at least confident that they are our best judgment. And I think that in light of the fact that, and I'll repeat what I said to Gloria Freeman, it really is now or never. And then the last thing I'll say is that what we've done, and it's not me, what Chatham has done over the last many years is reflected in a lot of ways in the values of many areas, but the real estate values. And by the way, I looked it up. The total value of real estate in Chatham is just a hair's breadth under $10 billion. It went up a year ago, fiscal year 2022, it went up 10%. Fiscal year 2023, it went up 20%. that is an index of the strength of leadership and community unity in getting things done and in making better lives for everybody in the community. That's what this project is all about. And so I'm going to say now or never, and I'm also going to say to everybody who's got concerns or maybe even opposed, I'm not going to stop trying to explain, persuade, discuss, listen, and bring you around to seeing that this is an opportunity that really we shouldn't miss. So with that, I will yield back.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Shell. Dean, did you have something to say on the
I
motion?
just wanted, with respect to the draft article, I just wanted to call to Jill's and Alex's attention. I've seen this in previous funding, borrowing language. There are two edits, I think, that they're grammatical, but it's right in the middle of the motion.
This is in the warrant, the motion in the warrant, Dean?
Yes, this is in the packet.
Yep.
What line is that? It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's the 8th line, the word therefore. It's misspelled, there should be no E on that. And then at the second line from the bottom, right in the middle, I think the word and should be that.
Okay.
Am I correct, Mr. Shaw?
I agree with that. I agree with that. And there's another therefore right square in the middle of the motion over on the right side, just before the word to.
Yeah, that's the one I
The
mentioned.
one, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, there's one in the up above as well, just before the provisory clause.
Where is that? What
In
line?
the,
In the article.
Oh, in the article
Yeah.
about. Oh, same thing.
Where was the missing and?
The second line, it's actually the third line from the bottom where it says total property taxes and may be levied. I think the intention is to say property taxes that may be levied.
Okay.
And the other comment I made, which is substantive, it says by select board member, I strongly would advocate that we invite the chair of the Council on Aging to offer the motion and be the principal speaker. Other members of the board can speak as well if they're recognized by the moderator. But I think Pat Burke, as we saw, and as I've experienced, she has direct knowledge about the workings of the Council on Aging. She's been a volunteer there for a long time. I hope that that's something that the board would welcome. Anyway, I wanted to make those points.
Thank you very much, Dean. Thank you for your leadership at the COA, the CFAL, and Mike, thank you for your energy on this issue. You're really pushing it, and Shireen's been on board the whole time as well. So really do appreciate your interest, and really appreciated the comments everybody made this evening, some extremely articulate. It's no surprise that I believe this is a project that has to go forward now, must go forward now, that meets the needs of our seniors, and in a wonderful confluence of a win-win. Also, we're going to help meet the needs of our workforce housing, affordable and attainable housing. If we go forward and we get approval for this project, then we also can do Stony Hill Road, 193 Stony Hill. So it's a clear win-win in my mind. I really do, I said to Mike under my breath when we were looking at the drawings this evening, I really do think this is a really, really cool facility. It's a beautifully designed facility. With a lot of forethought, I think it's going to meet our needs. I think it's, as Dean noted and others noted this evening, it's critical we have adult day health in this building. And I've argued for that all along, and it's just so great to see it there, and we truly need it. Mr. Barry, thank you for your comments. So this is a go. This is the right place. I've said before, and I'll say it again, we literally have scoured this town for every possible building lot, if you will, both public and private, to place a new COA. And here we are again with a gift, re-gifted by Mr. Marsh, and we'd be fools to look at it not to accept it and not to do something with it. I do agree that this is it. We can't do better than this. As a select board or as a town, we can't make a better investment for a COA than this site at this time. Yeah, it costs more money, but it's going to cost another $2 million in 2 years from now too. And given the state of the economy, we'd be smart to get it going now, rather than 2 or 3 years from now. Plus, this gift is for now. We're giving $1 million gift. And if we get trade-in value elsewhere, we're going to knock this overall net cost down. And I have to keep repeating myself because I believe in it so strongly. We're making an investment for 40 years, not for 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 or 10, 40. And it's really value added for this town. And and West Chatham, with all the naysayers saying that, there's trucks downshifting and exhaust, come on. I live right near there. I go through that intersection daily and on the weekends multiple times. Those rotaries are a home run. They have rationalized the traffic in West Chatham. They are a home run. You can now take a left turn out of George Ryder Road. Who'd have thunk it? So if any, I cannot counsel an argument that says those rotaries are not a success and they're not going to be assistive when we put our COA there. So I am totally on board, and I'll do everything in my power and in my travels to support this project, and I certainly tonight and until we get to town meeting and at town meeting as well. There's a lot to unpack for the naysayers, and I think we need to be ready to unpack every one of them, but I've got an answer for just about everyone. So, Shireen, please.
I just want to add, when you had mentioned the investment piece of it, and I don't want to sound smulchy or anything, but I really think that this is an investment in the quality of life of our seniors.
Absolutely.
And it's well-deserved, and we should be honoring our senior population a lot more than we have in the last few years. This has been a battle that has been pretty much uncalled for. We need to get this done, and this is the place, and I'm really happy we're here to do it. So can we take that vote now?
Shireen, I just want one other comment. Before the Council on Aging has been waiting since pre-fire station. Pre-fire station, maybe, they've been waiting forever. They were put on hold pre-fire station. I was here, so I remember. So now it's their time. It's their time. It's our time, but it's their time. Okay. Motion second, please. Mr. Shell, he can't help himself.
Shireen's right. Tonight, we were here to talk about the Council on Aging, the Center for Active Living, but let's not forget, we are also, it's a first step, small step, but in housing for people who need housing in Chatham. And it is a 2-for-1 deal, and it's very important that we recognize we are speaking to both of those communities.
Thank you, Mr. Shell. Okay, let's take a vote. Mr. Nicastro, replacing Mr. Castro.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Shell.
Aye.
And Mr. Dyken says aye as well. We want to vote to support. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Select Board support and recommend this funding article to the annual town meeting 2023.
Thank you, Mr. Nicastro.
Second?
Okay, super. Mr. Shell.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Nicastro.
Aye.
And Mr. Dyken says aye as well.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Select Board place a corresponding ballot question on the 2023 annual town election warrant relative to the funding. Is that correctly worded? Thank you. Thank you, Joe.
Second?
Super. Mr. Shell.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Nicastro.
Aye.
And Mr. Dyken says aye as well. And I thank you very, very much. And thank you, Jill and Terry and the leaders of the COA, Center for Active Living. And thank you, Rick, and thank you, Joel. And onward and upward. Let's go sell this. Thank you. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Nicastro.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Shell.
Aye.
Mr. Dyken says aye as well. Good night, Chatham.